Technology modernization necessarily incorporates technologies that are the focus of CES Government 2020. Cloud migration, artificial intelligence, advanced analytics, 5G, and the security essential to all aspects of data management. CES Government is pleased to welcome a distinguished panel of senior technology leaders for a moderated discussion about the processes and technologies upon which sound IT modernization strategies are developed and executed. Please welcome to the stage Acting Chief Information Officer for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Elizabeth Cappello. Assistant Secretary of Information Technology, U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs, Jim Gfrerer. Chief Information Officer for U.S. Department of Labor, Gundeep Ahluwalia. United States Postal Service Vice President for Enterprise Analytics, Jeff Johnson. And the discussion moderator, GBEF Co-Chair, Charlie Armstrong.
Those are bright lights. Oh boy.
I'm not saying there was alcohol in the green room, but there might have been. Is this on? Okay. Well, first of all, welcome panel. We've got quite a distinguished group here of technology leaders. And I think we've got a few also out there in the audience as well. So we're looking for this to be a pretty lively discussion. We're going to just start out with a few round the horn kind of questions, but we'd really like to make this session interactive. So while we're kind of discussing the first topics, we'd really like you to think about some questions that you would like to pose to us, because much more, we think you'll get much more out of this. We'll get much more out of this if it's an interactive session. So with that, let me throw it down to Miss Cappello, excuse me. I knew her before her, in her other married name, so Miss Cappello. If we could just all start out by kind of talk a little bit about your agency and who you are, and then what are some big things that you're really proud of that have happened recently? So, Beth.
Thank you, Charlie, and it's Cappello, not Michelson. But this is really interesting being under these lights. I haven't done this before, so I apologize if I look a little bit like a deer in headlights. But I am Beth Cappello. I am currently the Acting Chief Information Officer for the Department of Homeland Security, a job I have been in for exactly 4 weeks. And I said to Charlie, my greatest success thus far was surviving congressional testimony, which was my second week on the job. So, but I have been part of the DHS community since the creation of DHS, and prior to that with Legacy U.S. Customs. And I think here in the last year or so, some of the things that I am most proud that we've accomplished across DHS, first and foremost, back to the testimony, DHS had the most improved FITARA score here recently, yay, which was perfect. Particularly helpful before you go in front of Congress on FITARA, so that was good. But we've done some really great work with cloud migration. For those of you that aren't aware, my predecessor, Dr. Zangardi, had brokered a deal where we would vacate some space out of one of the primary DHS data centers, Data Center 1, so that space could basically be sublet to another customer. What that meant for me in my role at ICE was that I had to move all of my stuff out of Zone B in a very short period of time. And we were successful with that. And in fact, in the last 12 months, ICE has completely migrated all of its applications out of on-premise DHS data centers. And I think that that's a trend that's going to continue across DHS. Well, wait a minute. I know it's a trend that's going to continue across DHS because I've made it a mandate for us to get out of DC2 in the next 2 years. So I'm really looking forward to accomplishing those activities over the next 24 months.
Great. Jim?
Sure. I think the big thing I always remind people is a lot of folks, especially in the commercial sector, don't realize the scale of VA. And I didn't appreciate it, even being a veteran myself, until I arrived a year ago. So you look at it, we're serving 20 million US veterans, about 9.5 million of those are active in the system using Veterans Health, Veterans Benefits, and National Cemetery, that last chance to make a good impression on the family and the survivors of our deceased, our past veterans. It's a $230 billion enterprise. If it was commercial sector market cap, that'd be about a revenue and budget, that'd be about Fortune 10. And again, 3 very differential business lines. Obviously, the majority of that's Veterans Health, about 170 medical centers, 1,200 outpatient clinics, 56 benefits regional offices, 133 cemeteries, just a massive scale in terms of infrastructure and facilities. When you look at accomplishments over the past year, I would say the number one I would point to is our journey on DevOps and our journey really ultimately to product line management. There's multiple people we can quote with that notion of never let a good crisis go to waste. And my crisis coming on, as I thought I'd get settled, was deliver on Mission Act, in about 5 months. So essentially, our team using a DevOps, a very disciplined MVP approach, delivered on June 6th around a good chunk of the entitlements around community care and urgent care. So a whole slew of new benefits that the Congress provided to veterans, which is a great thing. It's what's a challenge is some past failures at VA cause sometimes members on the Hill to say, well, go faster, right? If you couldn't do it in 2 years, do it in a year. I get the sense of urgency, but it really does stress the system quite a bit. So proud of the team delivering on mission. We delivered on Colmary, which is the forever GI Bill. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, I mean, the GI Bill is one of those transformational things coming out of World War II, and it continues to give and really create just a multiplicity of economic benefits across our entire ecosystem. So those are the accomplishments, I'd say.
Great. Gundeep?
So first of all, I don't know what I did to get the post-lunch session. So whoever I pissed off, I'm sorry. Next time, let's not.
You're a bad man.
Yeah, you're a bad man.
That's right.
We wanted to make sure everybody had that cookie before they walked out.
Yeah.
So they didn't
Yeah, I
share
missed it.
buzz.
Can I go now?
Yeah.
So at the Department of Labor, I usually want to start with what does Department of Labor do? I think that is one thing that sometimes is lost. I know everybody knows about the Bureau of Labor Statistics. The jobless number came out yesterday. Everybody was very happy about it. But we also do a host of other mission-related services to protect the American workforce, train them, pay out claims. So we are the beginning of every temporary visa, work visa that is issued for temporary folks by DHS, by USCIS. We are the beginning of each one of that. We protect all of your 401ks, your health plans. All of those are protected by Employment Benefits Security Administration, which is a part of labor. We run the apprenticeship programs in collaboration with states across the nation. We are responsible for coordinating all of the unemployment insurance claims across the nation. In collaboration with VA, Veterans Employment and Training Services is responsible for running the transition assistance program for all the veterans coming back from various parts of the world. And I can go on and on. We pay claims to all the federal workman compensation claims as people get hurt on. We keep mines safe. Our OSHA investigators are keeping every workplace safe. And we are across 650 locations across the nation. So when I came in as the CIO, it was almost like these lights are in my eyes kind of experience, where you have a diversity of mission areas, and how can you develop a modernization program that sort of caters to the needs that are from a statistical agency to a. But I would say that we are very proud that has happened over the last 3.5 years, I would say. And one of the proudest accomplishments, I would say, is our platform that we have created, and we are using that platform to modernize all the legacy applications and put it into that. And I will give you the latest addition into that platform, which I'm very proud of. Every temp visa, when an employer has to request the Department of Labor to provide a labor certification, after which they go to USCIS and apply for that temp worker. We would issue a labor certification on paper that would be printed on a currency paper for security purposes, sent to them, and all that paper would be turned in to USCIS. This has been the process for the last 10 to 20 years. I am pleased to report that starting January, that no more are we using any of these paper certifications. We have actually, just like your boarding pass, when you go to United, you get the employer gets their labor certification along with the notification that your labor certification has been sent to DHS, to USCIS. You may go directly to them and apply for your temp worker. And the impact of that is, I mean, a year ago, I don't know if you guys remember, in Maryland, there were crabs that were rotting, but there were no temp workers to pick those crabs, right? That is the kind of impact that a process like this would have by not relying on a paper-based process and shaving a week off. So that platform is also, in my mind, there would be a time where to interact with the Department of Labor, whether you're reporting injuries for OSHA, or you're applying for a temp worker, or you're reporting how many veterans you have hired for the Vets Medallion program, you don't need 50 different profiles to be able to interact with us. So we have integrated with login.gov. We are doing identity management in a centralized fashion, and there is a reuse as in these legacy applications and Mission 8 are going into that platform. Very proud of that accomplishment for the department.
Super, Gundeep. Jeff.
Good afternoon. I'm Jeff Johnson. I'm the Vice President of Enterprise Analytics for the Postal Service. As you know, the Postal Service delivers each and every day, 159 million addresses, 6 days a week, and whatever needs to be delivered on Sundays. I think some of the things that I'm most proud of and things I'd like to highlight this afternoon is some of the work that we're using data and analytics to really improve our capabilities as an organization, all the way from security of the mail and potentially hazardous mail to responding to incidents, using the breadcrumbs. We have 1 second breadcrumbs on every mail carrier's device that we're able to analyze, and when we're actually able to identify in an incident response where the mail carriers are going and how they're performing their work. We can also use the accelerometer data from those devices to really talk through employee safety and make sure that we're operating safely in the communities across the country. So using that data analytics all the way from mail safety and security through employee safety and capabilities to productivity, and making sure that 630,000 employees are effectively and productively processing and sorting the mail through the U.S.
Great. So now let's kind of shift the focus to what are some kind of challenges that you have on your plate? You know, things like either new policies that have come into place that you need to implement, furthering along, modernization things. What are those kind of nagging things that you just haven't gotten done yet that are kind of next on the horizon for you? So, Beth, if you could start us.
So I think it's interesting when you look across DHS. So I can speak about the things I'd like to do while I'm at the headquarters component. But when you look across DHS, you talked about varying mission sets, and I think we probably have some of the most diverse missions of any federal agency, everything from enforcement and facilitation, which you heard all about from the CBP perspective, to FEMA's mission in crisis situations, such as what we've got going on down in Puerto Rico right now. So I think when we look at what we're going to do across DHS, it is a challenge to say, everybody shall do this thing right now. And in this role at DHS headquarters, I think my primary focus is going to be on helping facilitate across the components. We have really great technology solutions and pockets of excellence across DHS, and I would like to bring those to the table for information sharing across the entirety of the department. But specifically for me this year, I think the big hairy problem for DHS is improving our network. Without getting the wide area network that DHS runs on in good shape, we're really not going to be able to do all of the other modernization things we need to do, whether it's cloud or AI. We operate in some pretty interesting parts of the United States where coverage and capability is a little tough. And so my main focus and challenge this year is going to be getting that wide area network in condition and shape to support the rest of the modernization efforts that we need to do.
That's right. You need to be able to see those moose as they're coming along from Canada.
Absolutely.
All right, Jim.
Sure, and I'll try to hit all three of the topics on the panel here, maybe to hit the waterfront. So I'd start off kind of in reverse and say IT modernization. So right about now, and I've talked about this on the Hill, we're sitting on about $1.2 billion of technical debt within VA, principally around infrastructure. That doesn't really account for the development. You know, the true kind of definition of technical debt is around software development, but technical debt from a hardware standpoint. So I know we've had great conversations with OMB and with our CFO about right-sizing it. You know, in a department that's grown 100,000 people in the last 10 years, that's a lot of mouths to feed. And so the good news is this is the first year we have an infrastructure readiness line. And for those of you who don't know, we have a centralized appropriation. I know there's a lot of departments and agencies out there that are considering going to that model. Come see me. We can talk pros and cons and where we're trying to go to get that in a better state, because otherwise you have things where the Hill will appropriate, like they did for EHR, or Mission Act, they'll appropriate $8.9 billion to VHA, and then they'll give $36 million for the IT development. And for those of you keeping score at home, that's 0.004%. That's statistically zero. So pretty hard to do the IT support on a $9 billion program with $36 million. So that's the challenges of having a centralized budget, and that's an offline conversation. But obviously we're focused heavily on our vendor management office. I know a lot of you, we've talked yesterday after my roundtable about our Office of Strategic Sourcing and how we're going about with our about $1 billion a year in outsourced spend for IT services and products. A lot of that we're trying to use the variety of category management, go to a managed service opportunity. We're looking at all the SaaS opportunities, the categories of management where we can use different funding lines to build, because again, and as we talked in the panel, the roundtable yesterday, we have a consumption without consequence environment, right? The administrations can come and say, I'm opening up this new regional office, or I'm expanding it, and I need 400 computers yesterday, right? And there's no consequence around that from a planning standpoint. So it's just really the wild, wild west, and I think we're getting a good hand around. Big development, obviously, in VA is the electronic health record modernization with Cerner. We're supposed to go live sometime this year with that. IT, obviously our main effort is around the infrastructure. And it's amazing when you go into Spokane and Seattle and do 100% tech refresh, as my director of IT ops, Jack Galvin, would say, funny, it cures a lot of ills, right? When you go in and make sure you're on a set tech refresh cadence and you don't have 40% of your endpoints that are older than 4 years, it creates a lot of ills, it prevents a lot of ills, takes care of them. Cloud, we're going about half of our portfolio into the cloud. We have an enterprise cloud with both Azure and AWS, so we'll continue on that journey. And then just from a client perspective, I mentioned HRM and VHA, doing a lot of work around that little financial services entity, that $130 billion entity called Veterans Benefits, doing pension automation, looking at the FAS job. We talk about payments. Those disability and comp payments every month are about $6.5 billion every month, right? So if you ask me what keeps me awake at night, it would be one of those FAS batch jobs going to Treasury failing, because I've seen the impact of even some minor glitches in it and what it creates in the veteran population. So again, those are areas we're putting a lot of time.
Great. Gundeep?
So So just like all my colleagues here, we have a large amount of technical debt as well. I think the government as a portfolio, if you look at it, we are spending about 75% of our money on O&M. At least that is what is reported on the IT dashboard. And about 25 goes towards operations and maintenance. Building new things. So I think that is just not a sustainable model. And at labor, we've been doing, for the last decade, it is 85-15, right? So I would argue our debt is probably larger than the average in the government. And I sort of look back to my days in the private sector and I say, what did we do differently, right? It was not a, once I do this modernization, I'll be good for 20 years or 10 years kind of mentality, right? And I think we have to get out of that culture. And that's why I think the biggest challenge in my mind is culture, right? Across the organization, there's one of my team members always says, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? And it's so true. And when I say culture, I mean the culture within the workforce, the IT workforce, who are delivering it a certain way and are used to delivering it. The culture of the DOL workforce at large, the non-IT workforce. I tell you, I go around the country and I sometimes feel like people have given up. They're saying IT is never going to help me in my lifetime, right? So you have to sort of change that dynamic culturally, right? And then our end users, the American citizens who depend on our services, have also lowered their expectations from the government, right? So it's across the board. I think culturally we have to fight this battle. Other than that, I think that at the Labor Department we face the same challenges, right? We are moving to the cloud. We are invested in operations and maintenance. You need seed money to do this new thing. I really want to thank Margie for the MGT Act. I think labor was one of the in FITARA scorecard, we had the only A when MGT was rated. And the reason for that was we had set up our working capital fund, we had started trapping the savings in there, and we were deploying it towards modernization. A little bit ahead of MGT, but MGT sort of institutionalized it. The other thing we are trying to do is, IT is decentralized, right? In all of our departments, I think that is one of the challenges. Why do we have 16 Tableau licenses, right? Why do we have 35 business objects licenses? So we are undertaking a lot of consolidation of that type. And that consolidation, IT modernization, cultural strains in the organization are, I think, the biggest challenges. Other than that, I'm afflicted with the same problems that every federal agency. We have too much debt and not enough money to sort of get out of it quickly.
Very good. Jeff?
It's really interesting times at the Postal Service. We're a large organization, not quite as large as VA, but we're a $71 billion organization, and we're at the center of a $1.4 trillion industry that really relies on the mail. And that industry is rapidly changing. So with the decline of mail products, with the diversion into digital products, whether it's digital signatures or pay bills online, and those sorts of business transactions, we're seeing the volume of mail rapidly decline. At the same time, we're seeing a rapid rise in e-commerce. And each of those things within this $1.4 trillion industry is being driven by technology and being driven by analytics and AI by the industry. So how do we transform the Postal Service to leverage the unique assets of the Postal Service, being in 31,000 post offices, delivering to 159 million delivery points each and every day, driving several million miles of road every day, understanding what information can be collected, how that data can be valued, and how we can leverage the intrinsic value of the Postal Service to improve our society and continue to improve the connections that we have, both from a personal perspective as well as from a commerce perspective. and really driving those e-commerce deliveries home. We deliver more e-commerce than anyone else to the home, and we deliver 47% of the world's mail at the Postal Service. So it really is a tremendous challenge. It's really interesting to be able to evaluate not only our perspective, but we try to ascertain the perspective of our customers throughout the industry.
Well, that explains why I didn't get a Christmas card for my children, but I did get a text message from them.
Yeah, that was a different reason, Charlie.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I do have some more questions, but as I said earlier, we really want to start to have some interaction to keep you guys awake after lunch, since your blood sugar is dropping and you haven't been properly caffeinated. So with that, I'm going to stand up so that I can start to see some folks. I would encourage you to kind of raise your hands a little bit and shout, or is that Teddy? Yes, it is. I'll try to keep it to like under 5 minutes for the question then. Or maybe I'm getting you confused with Ryan Janice.
Oh, hey. Thanks, Charlie. That's a good setup. But a quick question, and again, what a wonderful panel. Great CIOs. God bless all the good work you do for our nation. The question is hypothetical. Let's say the budgets didn't go up, and there was an opportunity for your budgets to potentially go down, and then you could, in essence, use services from each of the four of you. So if the four of you were combined and you were to potentially use services from each other as shared services, do you think that could happen, and where would you reach? I mean, would the VA reach into labor? Would Post Office reach into DHS for moving product around? Could DHS use its network to work across our great nation? I'm just curious about how to work together.
Age-old question of fungibility among appropriations.
Yes,
budgets.
and shared services.
Well, I think you see that, right, with GSA, with the EIS, right, with the infrastructure services contract. So I think that's already happening, and they want us to go really fast. And of course, you know, that's kind of an open question about how fast we're going to get that done. I know that in the Federal CIO Council too, Suzette and some of the team, some of the other agencies have pioneered some collaborative efforts around shared services. So it's happening. It's definitely something, you know, that at scale we can all do better. I was struck by, when we were doing the O365 conversations, the diversity of price points. I guess I was both surprised and not surprised, right? But so I think there really is some scale to be leveraged. I don't know if anybody else has a point on that. Or.
Yeah, so absolutely.
Yeah.
So the CIO Council, I think it's a tight-knit community, and we come together. But on a project-by-project basis, I would say a lot of collaboration already happens that is not visible to people, right? For example, with VA, we have all of these data feeds that we bring in as to who's being discharged, and DoD, who's being discharged, what is happening to a veteran, and then we have BLS data as to what zip code has the best jobs for which skill set, right? So we are sitting on things like that all the time. I mean, I just gave you an example where we are collaborating with DHS to eliminate a currency paper that we were importing from Africa, and that country is going out of business, I think. So, I mean, there are a number of U.S. Postal Service. I mean, I have three of my panel members here. We are working with all three, right? We have worked with Postal Service to reduce the amount of opioids that are being prescribed for our FICA claims, for our workman compensation claims. Our average, for some reason, was much higher than the average opioid prescriptions in other places. So there are those kind of collaborations that are already happening. And I think the other piece is like, you know, you have to look at Office 365, right? I mean, the infrastructure or a service that is a commodity in my mind, right? Email, OneDrive, data centers, cloud. That, I think, the CIO community has to come together, and we would gladly use each other's services as it makes sense. I also want to say something about reducing appropriations, and I'm usually unpopular when I say this at my own agency. For example, the Department of Labor spends, and so there is paucity of resources across the government. I don't disagree with that. But we spend $600 million on IT, okay? We have 15,000 employees. Somebody can do the math. We are spending close to $35,000 to $40,000 a piece every year on IT, okay? So when my team says, when are we getting more money? I tell them you have enough money. You have to go look inward as to what will you stop doing that is stupid right now and divert it towards IT modernization that impacts the American citizen, right? So there is a little bit of introspection I think every department has to do, and I get into trouble when I say this especially to our unionized staff. The union members really get upset with me. But I do think it is a reality. I mean, just look at the IT portfolio. As a government, on that, in my opinion, IT is being underreported on that portfolio. But it is $80+ billion that we are spending on IT, right? So we need to do some introspection as well.
I would say the Postal Service is open for business. We do a lot of work for all the federal agencies, and we actually have a digital business group that we formed within the Postal Service to proactively reach out to federal agencies and really understand what are the needs that line up with the assets of the Postal Service. How could 31,000 post offices help your agency? How could the fact that we're on 5 million miles of road every day help your agency? How can our validation of geospatial assets or attributes by a trusted professional that's in the communities really help your agency complete its mission? And there's a number of opportunities across a wealth of services. And when you think beyond just the mail, but you think about getting your passport done at the Postal Service, there's a lot of opportunity in front of us. And we really need to think about what does the Postal Service mean to us? And in the next 10 years, what is it and how are we going to pay for it? And one of the ways that we are going to pay for it in the future is we are going to be a platform that enables some of those digital feedback loops that you need for a really effective learning and really effective platforms, particularly for the federal government.
I just pretty much want to put repeaters in the postal trucks, and maybe you can take them to our remote locations for our P25 network.
We've talked about that. We have a universal hardware mount that we're prototyping on the postal vehicles because we think there's a number of opportunities with the vehicles when you think about moving big data to some of these remote locations and you think about getting a short range, high speed type of connection. That's a lot easier than trying to get long range. So if you start thinking about store and forward concepts as a digital platform and that intersection of a physical, ubiquitous, universal service and digital capabilities that the Postal Service has, we manage 90 petabytes of data. We're moving about 2 terabytes of data across the network to feed informed delivery for 21 million users each and every day. So we've got both capabilities, and it's, again, a really exciting time to think about what the possibilities are.
I like that idea. So the agent will go, okay, it's 2 o'clock mail delivery. I ought to be able to get radio connectivity right. All right, another question out here. How about this side of the room? I'm going to start calling on people if I don't see it.
Managing records, electronic records is a common problem. Managing electronic records is a common problem in government. I'm just wondering if you've got any strategies around that. Is it a big problem, or have you got that all solved?
Well, I think good.
It's solved, no?
Yeah, it's solved.
Yeah, it's done. We did it yesterday.
Yeah, that's right.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to, I mean, I only heard it come up in one of the panels, I think this morning, about, about the challenge around data. And I think we're at the beginning of the beginning in terms of our federal data strategy, right? And what the agencies are doing. We just, at VA, we just hired our CDO here within the past several months. So really following through on that data strategy, doing the refinement that we were talking about, Again, I think for any of our enterprises, certainly ours, the amount of disconnected data and unstructured data is just beyond all known bounds. The one example too I would use in terms of electronic records, and I was thinking about this as Gundeep was talking too, is more partnering with the agencies in terms of that seamless transmission of data. One of the big ones for VA is, for those of you who are veterans, you have your DD-214, which is your record of service. And we say in the future, how many times should a veteran have to submit their DD-214 to the VA?
As many times as it takes.
That's the answer, 0. Give yourself an extra cookie. 0, because it will come across seamlessly in an electronic format from DoD once they hit the transmit button and separate or retire the individual. And then certainly the next big holy grail is all of the disability claims process, right? Very manual intensive. We've, Charles Worthington, who's our Chief Technology Officer, has already pioneered machine learning to process about 500,000 disability claims. And he's gotten the algorithm to a point where he and his team, that it's first pass 92% accurate, right, when checked later. So again, we're just at the beginning of the beginning on all those use cases, and at the start of every one of that is good, clean, structured data, right, which we don't have right now.
Beth, you want to talk about Lotus Notes? Or?
Lotus Notes or we don't have records management under control. And when we don't have data under control. And when you consider an agency like DHS, which we spend a lot of time with lawyers, both on our side and other sides, and discovery motions, and we have a very risk-averse community in terms of disposing of data. So we keep everything forever. I used to say in a previous job within DHS that I could solve a lot of issues with a couple of hoarding psychologists. But it's a real legitimate problem when, even in the context right now of exiting out of the data center, we have an entire eVault infrastructure from our most recent email system prior to getting to Office 365. And frankly, we have to figure out what to do with either the system or all the data, because we certainly can't get rid of it. The Lotus Notes reference goes back to a case that was prior to the creation of DHS. It goes back 23 years, 24 years. And that Lotus Notes mail system is still on-prem because the case hasn't been fully adjudicated. So when we look at the creation of data, and there's been lots and lots of numbers thrown out over the last day or so about how quickly data is being created and what we're doing with it, there is a serious tsunami coming at all of us in the federal space in regards to records management and data disposition. And I think it's something, as thought leaders, both in government and across the vendor community, that we really need to talk about seriously. I used to make jokes with folks about, can somebody get me a deduplication solution that can go across all my Windows file and print servers in the field? Sounds pretty straightforward, and I'm pretty sure my AI guy down at the end can get me something that works. But I've actually posed this to analytics folks and still can't get an answer. So of course, in our organization, somebody creates a PowerPoint for everything, and I know that doesn't happen anyplace else. And then you're going to have your meeting, and you share that PowerPoint with 20 of your closest friends, and then they share it with 20 more of their closest friends. And 25 years down the road, you still have 500 copies of that PowerPoint. Right now, we don't have a good, clean, easy way just to deal with that, let alone email and all the other sources that we create. So I said a lot. It's
Okay, last question is mine. Lightning round. You get 15 seconds each. Where do you want to be in 3 to 5 years? Use short words.
Beach bar.
Consumption with consequence, half our portfolio in the cloud, and budget more aligned with demands of the client and the businesses.
Gundeep?
So cut my legacy in half, right, and improve every citizen service that we provide to the American people to improve by at least 15 to 20%.
Jeff?
We want the assets of the Postal Service that are there every day maximized with their value that they can provide to those communities, particularly with the local area of commerce, the ability for shippers, suppliers, and consumers to connect using the platform of the Postal Service.
Lotus Notes retired.
Okay, very good. All right, well, I want to thank our panel. They've done a great job. Thank you for the listening audience and participation.